So, lessons we learned and lessons we're still learning. My question is, should the adults learn in principle? Should this generation learn, or we are savvy enough and we shouldn't? I guess the answer is yes, we should, right? So I looked at this funny things. I found them on the internet. I thought, really, when history goes backwards, you learn that today parents would prefer children not to play video games but watch TV. 50 years ago, you would rather watch TV because TV was so new. 500 years ago, you would rather do what you do, but many, many, many thousands years ago, I wish my children were staying at home. And every generation is not happy with its younger generation, which is pretty amazing, but again, the law of life. So I went backwards as early enough as Socrates, and Socrates is one of the first known contemplating about the younger generation, and the younger generation in his eyes was horrible. That's what he wrote about the younger generation. I'm not going to read out loud, but you see it well, right? So, if we think about the people who are criticizing young generations today, not much is different. Not much is different. So what is it? Law of life, human nature, or both, or something else? Older generations always think they know better, and we're all kind of older generation in comparison with our students in schools, right? So the question for me is, that's from Korchak, and that's from the book, When I'm Little Again. And here's one smart adult who can step into the shoes of a child and think as a child and learn from children. And that's what he says. And that's a completely different perspective. So,
I'm Sarah, I'm with the Richard program.
sure. Come on. What program?
Richard.
Oh, yeah, but we haven't seen you before.
Yeah, I think there were like a few.
Oh,
months
different
that we
people.
come in.
Okay, come on in, please.
She's an adolescent medicine physician.
Oh, okay.
With our team.
Sure.
That's
Okay, so if you look at the last phrase, which is kind of fascinating for me, grown-ups will say that people will never have wings. But I was a grown-up once, and I say, yes, they could have wings. If I tell you now, imagine you're a butterfly, let's fly. How many of you will be able to fly? Not thinking, this woman is crazy.
Sorry, not thinking what?
Not thinking that I'm crazy, suggesting this. There was, I'm sure you know the name of Anton Chekhov, who was a very famous writer and playwright. He had a brother who is less famous in the world, but quite famous still. He was an actor, and in his senior years, he became a theater teacher. So, Michael Chekhov. So one of the lessons he was teaching was he needed his students learn how to walk properly and how to be able to transform in anything. So he was teaching it like, imagine you are a crystal vase. Stay as a crystal vase, behave as a crystal vase. You are afraid they will drop you and you will break into pieces, and others walk around, the distance is very close, be careful, she is a crystal vase. You need not to touch her, or if you touch so gently that she won't break. So, and adults were able to do it, but those were adults who were learning how to become actors and actresses. And he was an adult, but he was an actor himself. But here, an older man, who is an educator, who is definitely not an actor, but the one who preserved a child within himself. And that's quite a different story, but apparently same story. He can do it, he can fly. So, lessons we learned from courtship. I put together lessons I learned. They are all based on courtship's words. What we will do next, we will go through every slide, discuss every lesson I learned. And it's not everything I put here, but kind of key ones. And then I would love you to add at least one, or you stop me on any slide saying, this is the one which is mine. Like, this is the most important for you, okay? Or I'm sure you got something else from courtship. So let's start from my first lesson. So this is what I learned. I don't know, I search, I ask questions. By deepening, I complicate. Every elsewise is a new stimulus for the efforts of thought. As a result of these trials and tribulations, teachers construct their own practical knowledge. There are thoughts that can be born only of your own pain, and precisely those are the most precious ones. What do you think of that? So let's talk on each slide. And whoever wants to talk, just go ahead.
I just feel like the last sentence really resonates with me because Kojak says there are thoughts that can be born only of your own pain, and then precisely those are the most precious ones. Because I personally, I feel that if somebody have going through like hard times and pain, then the person can be more empathy for other people because they know how it feels.
Okay. But you're talking about physical pain.
No, like physical,
Anything.
mental, and everything. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Jane?
I'm sorry, I was thinking of something completely different.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
was
sure.
wondering if there was any way today, if we're going to do this, to configure us so that we can see each other's faces more.
That's a great idea. So
All in the same
because
front row.
they are all on wheels, so come closer, we'll make a circle and you'll see faces, yeah. Because you don't need the internet or computer now. I will share this,
Like how we're gonna sit
or
here.
you can take these chairs, you don't even need to move. Yeah, take these chairs, take them out, and we'll see each other. Sarah, come on. Yeah, and we have chocolates. We usually have chocolates.
I'm not gonna get away with not eating. Just to initiate you.
Unless you have diabetes. Are you good? Okay, great. So we have a circle. So, who wants to talk on this?
I'm just thinking about how,
By the way, do we need a microphone to make it better?
I think if
sound?
we're sitting in a circle, that's fine.
Yeah.
Because we're projecting to
Do you
people.
need a microphone?
No, I can see people's faces.
Yeah, it's a good idea, and actually, I wanted to have a room which is different, but, wow, that's, yeah,
Next time.
yeah, next time. Who was speaking?
I was speaking.
Yeah, Claire, yeah.
Or trying to.
Yeah, please, sorry.
Try to explain what I think, but to me, this speaks to just how when you experience something, it's completely different than trying to sort of understand it from someone else's perspective. Even though we can empathize when you experience it, you get that knowledge in a whole different kind of way, and that helps you relate to the world on a deeper level. And even if your story isn't the same as somebody else's story, once you've gone through pain and you understand the process of going through pain and gaining that knowledge that way, you can relate to people on that human level, because that's all part of the human experience.
Okay.
Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah,
It does make sense.
yeah, well,
As a teacher, it resonates with me because like all the new teachers I meet, they always say, oh, I can't wait to be in my 5th year, 6th year, because I wouldn't have more work to do. And I said that's not true, because each year is different, each group is different, and you have to wait until you see your students to be able to prepare your class, because depending on who is in the class, your lesson will be different. And if you repeat the class, it won't, if you teach like the same class to different students,
yeah,
it will never be the same ever.
of course, it depends on the students, right? Okay, girls?
I see a lot of positive out of that lesson, that he refers to complications, searching, trials and tribulations, and this pain, but at the bookend of every of those thoughts, there's a lot of genesis that comes out of it. There's a lot of development, a lot of creation, and so for me, it redefines the purpose of that pain that we go through.
Okay, okay. I'm talking about the lessons I learned from Portugal, and we're talking on each, and then you will add whatever you want in terms of lessons. Anyone else?
I think one of the hardest things is to accept that there will always be trials and tribulations, that it will always be bumpy. I mean, I think it might be human nature to think that you get, it's like when I was a child, I thought, when I get to be 21, I'll be a grown-up and it'll be all sorted.
Yeah.
From then on, it's just going to be smooth, and then, I mean, it's almost like every year, and every time I would teach, I would think, this time,
Perfect.
and finally,
Yeah.
somewhere I woke up and went, no, it's always going to be bumpy. It's like,
It's the law of life.
it's like the grain of sand in the oyster brings the pearl, but you have to have the grain of sand. And to accept that, I think it's actually, it's inspiring. It's like
It's called wisdom.
yeah.
Okay? So lesson number 2, they are not because one is more important than the other. This one in particular, I invite you to read yourselves, but this one I think is absolutely brilliant. And I would love to talk more about that because we never mentioned it. You know what came to my mind when I was reading this, and of course I knew it before, but when I reread it, I remembered Claire's example about dead ends from your nephew. Do you remember this example she brought in? No? Yeah. So, the pets, yeah, the pets, yeah. Dead ends as pets, yeah. Okay, so what do you think of this?
hardest thing to do, to witness and not judge and not project and not do all those things, to simply witness and be with. And
Be
see
with,
what comes.
yeah, be with,
I
yeah.
think it's the hardest. Every day I struggle with that. I know it, and I have to remind myself and remind myself and remind myself.
Okay. Alice, how does that feel? You work with the youngest in the group, yeah?
Yeah.
So how does that feel? They're kind of the least experienced in comparison.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes I feel like I'm like a child working with them. Because like always be with a child and kind of thinking in a child way. Well, that was just easy for me to do. So
Which is perfect.
yeah,
Well,
it
it
feels
is,
good.
yeah, yeah.
But sometimes when you talk with adults, they feel, oh, how come you talk like a child? That's not okay. For them, they are okay because they're not okay because seems like you are kind of naive.
Uh-huh.
But I just don't think that's naive.
Well, it's interesting, the word naive and the concept of naivety has kind of derogatory meaning for many people. When adults say you are naive, it has negative connotation. But do you think being naive is always bad or bad at all?
No, I think it takes away the shoulds. As we get older, there's a lot of shoulds about how I should do something, or
Yeah, or
and-
must.
or must,
Or
or
want to.
yeah. So it's that what could be, what might be, what it gives more openness to
Uh-huh.
different outcomes.
It's a kind of innocence, which isn't necessarily a negative thing. That's what I see.
Yeah, for me, when I hear innocence, I'm thinking if innocence is not ignorance, I'm totally fine with it. But if innocence is because of ignorance, then it kind of puzzles me in a doubt. Secret, what do you think of
Of this quote,
this? Yeah.
it reminds me of that video that we watched, the one with the kids. One where they just watched, and then especially when was it the seesaw? No, the swing.
Yeah.
The swing, where they started like that's kind of what it reminded me of, and sometimes
Okay.
kids just need to work it out, and
Uh-huh.
like to put it to lesson 1 too. Like I feel like sometimes they need to experience, and we just need to watch, and that's how they learn.
And that's the hardest part, not to say, yeah, careful, careful, don't do that, don't touch, not so, I'm talking about myself. That's exactly how I would react. But yeah, I guess we need to resist the temptation. So here's the one, which is the epigraph to the book we were planning to discuss today. The book, When I'm Little Again. And this is the epigraph to the adult reader, which Court should put up front to start the book. And this is a dialogue with the adult reader, kind of. So he's saying, you say, meaning you adult, say dealing with children are tiresome, you're right. You say because we have to lower ourselves to their intellect, lower, stoop, I like the words, yeah, stoop, bend, crouch down. You are mistaken. It isn't that which is so tiring, but because we have to reach up to their feelings, reach up, stretch, stand on our tiptoes, as not talk. This is how the book starts. What do you think?
Actually, because I taught to kindergarten, grade 1 theater in French, and I always thought that working with children is tiring physically because you move a lot with them and you have to think a lot. But when you rest, then you're fine. When you work with adults, I find it's tiring because it's all mental and it starts going around. And even if you rest, actually you can't even rest because you're always thinking. So I find that it's not true.
This is not true?
I don't find it tiresome. I find it more, like giving
Okay.
more energy.
Okay.
I think children like challenge you to be like a better person in working with them, and that, I don't know if it's, I mean, yeah, it can be tiring because
Do you
it's
think
something
they
that you
intentionally
consciously
challenge
think
you,
about.
or it's not?
No, I don't think it's
They- By their
intentional.
behavior,
Yeah, no, I don't think it's intentional. I
Okay.
think that we need to be thoughtful and intentional, and that part is the part that's a challenge.
Okay?
I don't know if them intentionally challenging us is a bad thing. They should be challenging us. We're supposed to be there to support them. They're supposed to be asking for guidance and challenging us to.
No, the question is whether they do it intentionally.
Yeah, that's
Do
their,
they?
I think so. Well, I think that's they're supposed.
Well, the word suppose, yeah, well, they're supposed to do what they want to do, right? So the question is, when children ask you questions or do something which you don't expect, and they are kind of, provoking you, if you wish, do they do it intentionally always? What do you think, Rob?
No, I think they're exploring where boundaries are, where what is okay with this person, which we all do as adults all the time. It's quicker for us. And we're also making assumptions, which may be inaccurate, but we learn to do that to be efficient.
And we know formal boundaries.
And we know like those rules of
Yeah,
engagement
yeah.
with each other, whereas kids might even know, but then want to test it, want to experiment that
Okay,
this is the line with this person.
okay. What else?
I think just compare with adult children are more unpredictable because they always want to explore something new. So it may like seem to us it's tiring because we don't know what they're gonna do next. So, but also it makes every day really fun working with them because every day is very new experience. And also I think that like Amila just said, like work with children maybe physically you're gonna move with them and maybe make you tired, but then mentally because you don't really have any stress because if they want something they will tell you directly. But for many adults they don't say it directly. You have to figure out. So I think that's the difference.
Children are not passive aggressive.
True. So
That's- That's what
Yeah.
when I hear what you were saying, it's like children are,
Yeah,
they're honest.
Yeah.
When I started in theater, I worked in children's theater and I toured, I acted in a lot of shows. And children's audiences are the best teachers because if what you are doing is honest and engaging, you could hear a pin drop unless they laugh.
yeah.
The minute that you're phony, just even the tiniest, they start to talk to themselves. And they instantly give you feedback, so you learn by doing. And they don't just sit there politely.
There's a fantastic Russian movie which is called A Magic Power of Art. And one of the scenes in this movie is a group of elementary school graders. I'm not sure it's translated into English, but just in case, yeah. There's an incredible scene there. An elementary school group comes to the movie theater. It's like 1970s, I think. And what they watch is the Civil War, that is 1920s. And if you remember the history, it's white guards and red guards. So, and they are watching this battle between the white guards and red guards. And red guards are kind of shaky at the moment and not very strong. And the kids jump out of their seats and start, shouting, "Be strong, we'll help you." And then they took out their small things, I'm not sure how you call them, like a small piece out of wood, and then you use a rubber on it.
Slingshot.
Yeah, and started shooting, helping the red guards to fight and win over the white guards. And it was so real that it was almost surreal, yeah? Here they are in the movie theater, and all of a sudden, this magic power of art brings them up and they act as if they are right there in the fields. Can you imagine adults behaving like this? Hardly, hardly. Unless you're the adult like Korchak, which is extremely rare. So who can say that this is something you would take as a lesson for yourself?
I just wanted to bring up the voice of the youth as well. So I mostly work with teenagers, and I
Yeah.
think that it's very true that youth are more emotionally attuned to what's happening, and to keep up with what they're feeling takes a lot out of you, because you have to go back to that place in your mind. And even though like he's using the word tiring, like yes, it does take.
Well,
energy,
he of
but-
course doesn't think this
Yeah.
way. He's putting it this way for us to talk about it.
Mhm.
Okay? So, lesson number 4. Well, no, stay here. Children are not a casual encounter who can be passed by hurriedly or dismissed rapidly with a smile and a hello. Children account for a large proportion of mankind. Remember Jonathan was talking about in different countries it could be 60% of the population. 60% of the population. And we consider them not ready yet. We decide for them. Children have been, are, and will be. So, anything here?
I think it goes back to that children are people now. You're not the people they were.
Yeah, yeah. And some actually don't have long lives, unfortunately. Not destined to have them. Claire?
And just the value of like taking the time to get down on the same level as a child and connect with the child and that sort of conveys that respect and that value of that being.
And again, not to bend down, but to lift for the child or children, yeah?
It goes back to what you were saying earlier about when you pass by people and you say, hello, how are you, and you keep going.
Yeah, I'm great, yeah. Only my wife has a cancer, yeah, but I'm great, yeah. Oh, great, yeah, and just passing by. Yeah, so children deserve our attention, and they could be very, very deep, and deep in grief as well, by the way. And this is also very important to remember. Lesson number 5, we were talking about it many times, but I decided to keep it here because I think it's extremely important. And each time I remind you, I remind myself as well. What is needed is a guide who will politely answer, because we don't dismiss stupid questions of adults. We try to find the explanation to this stupidity, but we dismiss even bright questions from children because they are children. And there's a joke when the father is driving through the countryside and the little boy is sitting behind and the mother next to him, and the boy keeps saying, "Oh, Daddy, why is the sun so bright today?" And the father says, "I don't know." "Oh, Daddy, look at this cloud. It looks like a sheep. Why is that?" "I don't know." "Oh, Daddy, look at this." "I don't know." And the mother says, "Stop bothering Daddy. He's driving." And Daddy says, "Oh, it's okay. Let him ask. Let him ask." And I would keep saying, "I don't know." So, familiar, right? Sounds kind of, but that's what's happening. So if we expect questions, children expect answers, and then they stop questioning. And then we inquire, what happened? Why didn't you ask?
What do you think Korchak would say if he was driving the car?
Well, first, I don't think he would, but second, I think he would have been answering, because as we all know, it's possible to answer even when you are driving a car, clearly. I think he would get into explanations, Alice.
Yeah, I think it's okay if you really don't know, but if you.
Oh, yeah, of course,
Yeah,
of course.
explore with children, that would be great. And sometimes like parents, they're just really, really tired, they're burnt out, they really don't have the energy. So what we, like in our school, what we always suggest parents, like you get more support if you can. For example, if you like one day you can spend, like you can invite like grandparents to come to like play this with kids, and you have some time for your own, because parents do need that break to like temporarily be away from the child and get some fresh, to fresh themselves. That's very, very important. Same for the educator as well.
I think Korchak would say, why do you think? And ask the child questions and value that child's
Excellent.
imagination. or
Excellent. I was
creativity
about
and stuff.
to say, when the adult doesn't know, the most appropriate thing is to say, what do you think? And the child would always know why the sun is bright and the sky is that blue, this shape of blue or shade of blue, and why the cloud is of this shape, not different. The child would immediately explain. Right? And as we were talking about it before, children love to be our teachers. We just need to give them this opportunity more often. And not because we are pretending, but because apparently they know a lot through observation as well. And we shut down on this kind of observation of the world because we're always in a hurry. There's an incredible French novel, I don't remember the title of it, and the woman in the main character, she's a very, as many of you, a very powerful, vibrant personality who lives her life speedily. You know what I mean? Like speedily. She gets up early in the morning, her whole day is scheduled, and she lives her life. And she walks to her office like really fast, and she bypasses everyone in the street, kind of like New York, you would walk, yeah, you don't see people, you just navigate through, right? And at some point in her life, all of a sudden, there's no like logical reason, she decides she needs to slow down, to the point that she moves into a senior home. And she's 50, like early 50. And one day, she starts walking in the street, like walking. And all of a sudden, she noticed, oh, and it's the same street she's been walking for many years, right? And all of a sudden, she noticed, oh, here's a flower. Oh, there's a tree here. And this person I see every day. And what is this person doing here on the bench? And all of a sudden, she discovered her life from a different perspective and different side. I'm not saying I can't relate to this speed, I can't, so far. But I mean, it's a very different perspective of life. What I'm saying is children have a speedy life, but in a different way. They are fast, but they observe. They are fast, but they notice the details which we bypass and not notice. You know what I mean? Like when we're running to work or somewhere, we wouldn't notice a butterfly, what is the color of its wings, etc. Right? How the wind is blowing. No, it's just run through life.
And they do it with such wonder.
Yeah.
Well, it's the being present, like
Yeah.
the mindfulness or the being present or being in the moment.
Being in the
And as
present,
adults,
yeah.
we get more either focusing on the past or the future.
Or the future, or the task, like
Yeah.
immediate future, like in
Yeah.
5 minutes.
Yeah, I think for me, the greatest lesson that has been reinforced for these 8 days has been that the child is the teacher. It's like, somehow it feels to me like that's behind almost everything that he
True,
wrote,
true,
that
true.
he did. That's the fab quote.
Those of you who, well, I'm sure each went through a school at some point in life. Did you ever have an experience when a teacher gave you an opportunity to be a teacher for your class for a day? Like self-governing school for one day and you are teaching and teachers are sitting in the same classroom, no? Yeah?
Yeah.
So, in my experience, it's a regular thing to do. Like once a year, children become administration teachers, etc. And teachers are just sitting at the back of the classroom and they're not allowed to do anything. I mean, other than being students. And students absolutely enjoy to the point of unbelievable being teachers. Why is that? They're not like, thinking, oh, okay, on that day I'll show you. No. They are very generous, but they love being teachers, being in the position of standing here next to the teacher's desk, presenting, and they have to prepare. It takes a lot of time and energy, and they do it, and they love it, and they give those grades to all the students, and they're very generous with their grades, but they're also very objective. They might say, you know what, it's absolutely poor today, it should be unsatisfactory, but I won't give you unsatisfactory, you need to work harder. And you sit there at the back and you hear yourself, yeah? Only children are much more generous. Or why are you late? Oh, it's okay, come on in. I mean, there's no talk next to the door. What is it? What's the reason? You shouldn't. And
even before, being like 3 or 4-year-olds, they love to play school. That's what.
exactly. That's one of role plays they start with.
Yeah.
Either family, mother and children, and they love
They
playing
want to be
mothers,
the
of
mom
course.
or the
Yeah.
teacher or
Yeah, and then there comes school, yeah? And they play very, very fair schools, very just communities, right? So, does it tell you something? Even kids who go through bad schools, why is that?
Because they know what experience they want to have versus the one they did have.
So inside they know how it should be, yeah, like on an irrational level even. They know that this is not just, this is not fair, this is not cool. Let me show the teacher how it should be. The problem is for a teacher to learn, to notice, and to analyze why is the child is doing it this way? Maybe I've been doing something wrong, you know? So that's another thing which teachers could do. Try it in your classes. Give children an opportunity to be a teacher for a class or a whole day, or ruling the whole school, like being a school principal. We had it too. That was absolutely fun. Yeah, they were more strict than the school principals. Yeah, they were very serious, yeah. But it worked, it worked. So when adults think that children would create mass, it's exactly the opposite. It's exactly, they are quite organized when they are in charge. And they know it's not for a minute, it's just whole day. So for children, that's another thing. There's a children's poem which ends with the words, because time is rubber, you can stretch it as much as you want. So if you think in this perspective, the longer I live, the more I feel time becomes more and more speedy for me. Like 2 in the morning, now it's already middle of the day, right? But for children, 1 day is quite a duration. Have you ever thought of that? That we have very different concept of time. And so for a child, being in charge for a day, it's a lot. It's a lot. Okay, next. I put it on purpose for medical professionals. But I want to remind you one more time, we were talking about the last phrase from this quote. But in fact, the whole idea about the diagnosis, are you comfortable there? Yeah? The whole idea of a diagnosis, because the word diagnosis comes from the medical vocabulary, and teachers hardly ever use it. But if you think processing, not saying it out loud, but processing, we do need to give a diagnosis and to actually decide what kind of diagnosis is that. We need to observe and analyze. And the teacher who jumps at conclusions right away, that's like a bad nurse or doctor who would immediately say, oh yeah, I see, there's rash, prednisone. That's the decision. And that would be a correct decision for that short period of time, but it could also ruin your immune system. So the same about teachers. Very often, more often than not, teachers make this very fast decisions and quick. Okay, misbehavior, there are rules, yeah, and do this, that, and stop that, without actually thinking, and what is it in reality? Maybe this child simply wants my attention, which is quite often the case. Let's look at this. Every symptom has a meaning, but look at the very last phrase. Well, read through, of course, but the very last phrase, I think, is particularly important. Every child care institution is a research territory and a child raising clinic. I'm thinking if to put it somewhere inside the foyer of every school, like you enter the school building and you learn that it's in fact not just a place where you bring knowledge to kids, it's something else. You want to say something?
It just reminded me, in our school, whenever kids act out or whether there's a discipline problem, there's always something underneath that you have to go look at.
What could that be,
Yeah.
for example?
It could be something at home, it could be something with their friends, it could be like their fish died, it could be something. But not to take the action or reaction of the child for face value, and not that it's about the teacher, but it's about something else, and that's what makes it a lot more difficult.
But how would you diagnose what happened?
You ask. As much as you can, you ask.
Do you ask directly?
I don't, because I'm above my pay grade a little bit, but usually, like
But
people
teachers,
do.
yeah?
If it happens in my class, I do, but if it becomes like a big thing, then
Right.
usually the philosophy of the school is it's not to, like, you cross the line, now let's punish, but they kind of want to get to the bottom of it too, because there's always, like, you can treat the symptoms, but why not try and cure the disease instead? To put it into,
Sure.
since we're all medical right now, right? So try to find what the disease is, because a cough can be you can cure a cough, but a cough can be so many things underneath, right?
Yeah. And something much more serious could be
Yeah.
hidden.
It could just be a
behind
cough, it could
yeah.
just be, but it could also be something else.
Yeah, yeah.
It's also,
Yeah.
so when we diagnose in medicine, William Osler is like a famous writer for medical education as well. He talks about your diagnosis rests on your history taking. So no matter how great your investigations or how great your lab tests are, your diagnosis goes with the history. So you need to capture that accurate history or that story really. But you're only going to get as good of a story, as good of a relationship you have with that. And a doctor-patient's relationship is the patient.
Excellent, yeah. So it's about relationships first. And the level of trust a child has, or a patient in this situation, has in you, or in the relationship with you, that this child would actually tell or not tell.
And it's like an art, like, and it's so like fluid and different with every patient that you interact with. So it's like, yeah, I don't know how to describe it in a better way, but every interaction is so unique and based around that individual person. And so how you do things with one patient is going to be different than how you do things with another patient. And it's being present with that person in that moment and being able to explore things in a way that fits, hopefully, for them.
But don't you think that today's healthcare system and education system is much more working along the lines of protocol? Step 1 didn't work, step 2 didn't work, I'm taking step 3, 4, 5 in accordance with the protocol. And it's much easier, it takes away the responsibility from the teacher. You have a protocol and you can always say, you know, as in this famous joke, the surgery went well, the patient died. So the protocol from A to Z, done. The patient died, the child is expelled or something happened, but I did everything I could. But in fact not. In fact not. So because of that, pedagogy is considered arts and science together. It's never just research-based. Because if it's based on research, then how can you research every individuality? Because everyone is unique. You need this approach, which is what you were talking. Each time you have to reinvent how to approach this particular kid. But it's based on your knowledge, your previous knowledge, right? But you read in the person. You read the body language, you read the facial expression, you know the history of this person, you read. But you need to learn how to read, right? Because every gesture, every posture means something. I only recently learned, by the way, I'm absolutely ignorant about the body language as a theory. I recently learned that if you keep your hands like this, that while listening to somebody, don't you think that I'm watching you? No, I'm not judging. I just learned recently that if you keep your hands like this, that means you completely trust the person. Yeah. If you keep your finger next to your mouth, that means you disagree and you try to keep yourself together, not to jump up and tell a person right away that what you want to say. So there are lots of things which are small things and big things, but they will give you a clue what's happening with a child or a patient. Jane?
May I ask a question?
Sure.
I'm just wondering, because somehow people here all work within different systems in the education,
Yeah.
medicine, and law. How hard does the system support you in doing what we're talking about? Or how do you, that's what I thought you were gonna say.
No, no, I'm
so
lucky enough to be able to
How
have
do,
that
how
support.
do you
Navigate the
navigate
system.
your way through? I mean, it seems like in some way this course is training us to be guerrilla warriors or something. I'm just curious about that.
Okay.
because-
Then
How
we will,
serious do
we
you
will
have?
never have another one. Here we come to it. Alice.
So Jane, thank you for the question. Actually, we want to share with you that, because I'm in the childcare system, which is not included, in BC is not included in the education system, so it's more like a private thing that
Yeah.
in like different center they do. So I definitely feel like we don't get enough support, either from government or from like parents or, because like, as an easy, like early childhood educator, they get paid really, really very low wages.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's definitely a big problem because now more and more great teachers, they left the field because they feel they have to earn like more money to support family, so they have to find another profession. That's the really, really big problem because we are losing people.
Which actually should be exactly the opposite.
Yes.
The younger the kids, the more salary should come to teachers because that's the most important
Yes.
period of life, right?
Also, the way the system is built is like very segregated, like specialized. A child goes through so many people, he doesn't have a continuity and
That's the circle of a child.
yeah.
Yeah, when all these people are brought together. Yeah, brought together and they can meet and talk.
And
And
it's rare, that's the exception.
of course it's rare, yeah. But that's the whole idea, that's where the proverb comes. You need a village to raise one child, and a village could be huge, or it could be 8 or 10 people. But what is interesting, in theory and practice of special education, this whole idea of a circle of a child existed for quite a while. When you would bring a family, this particular child or teenager or adult with special needs, and counsel and everybody who works with this person, and then you create a plan. It's not called exactly the circle of a child, but it's exactly what it is.
Yeah, I think there are sort of like integrated case management meetings that we do have that already exist. And however, I think the difference with the circle of the child is that the child's needs are really at the center.
At the center.
And that's the focus of the circle
No,
of
no,
the
it's
child.
special ed, it's the same thing. Yeah, at the center. But I can give you examples from American schools, like 20 years ago. I know one girl who is now over 30, and I knew her for the last 20, take two.
Everyone's addicted to chocolate now.
Yeah. For the last 2 years, but remember, it's the last day today, so no chocolate, sorry, yeah. And I know her during the whole period, so and she has a brother, an older brother, and the parents are, a good family and enough funds and a lot of love and dedication to two kids. So the older son is absolutely physically and healthy and mentally great, a musician now. And the girl was born with a Down syndrome. So the mother was a biology professor at the University in California. With this girl, she decided to change the field, and she got her special education degree. And when the girl was of the school age, they put her into elementary school, like regular public elementary school, because that's the law. So, and they noticed that in a year, age 6 to 7, while she was just in the first grade, she so degraded mentally, and they couldn't get what was happening. And then it gives me, chills even to talk about it. What the mother learned was during the break, the children, California, it's almost all the time. So the children are out playing in the school year. So the teachers assumed that the girl would be aggressive. So they literally locked her in a kind of a cage. Yeah, so there was space with a metal door, and she could see through like bars, but she couldn't get out. She was locked in. And she couldn't play with anyone, and she was there, like a wild animal. And then during the class, they will bring her back. But during the recess, she would be sitting there, watching other kids play. And because of the Down syndrome and the verbal difficulties, she couldn't tell her parents about it. And because this time happens during the time when the mother is working, right? No one saw it for the whole year. And then, kind of accidentally almost, the mother realized what was happening. And then there was totally different story, different school, and just whole different life story.